afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me. For those of you that have just joined in the room, my name is Sonila Metushi. I work as a policy advisor for the Royal Dutch Transport Federation. Over the next half hour, our panel will explore how we can actually meet the future skills gap with broader diversity and inclusion in the public transport workforce. Let me introduce you to our very knowledgeable panelists. Maria Hofberg, Chief Commercial Officer at MTRX. Welcome, Maria. Kerstin Wagner, Head of Talent Acquisition at Deutsche Bahn. Welcome, Kerstin. Caroline Eglinton, Government-appointed Disability and Access Ambassador for the rail industry and Head of Inclusion at East West Rail. Welcome, Caroline. Daisy Chapman-Chamberlain, Rail Knowledge Transfer Manager at Innovate UK, KTN. Welcome, Daisy. And last but not least, Michelle Russell, Head of Workforce Analytics at the National Skills Academy for Rail. Welcome, and thank you all so much for being here with us today. I would actually like to start with you, Kerstin. I understand that the labor market in Germany is actually getting tighter and more challenging, and this is actually the case for other countries as well, not just Germany. By 2050, 50% more people will leave the labor market than enter it. How are you actually thinking about exploiting diversity and inclusion as a labor market potential?
Yeah, that's really a challenge, and the market is really shrinking. So it's the fact, and therefore diversity plays a crucial role because we can tap into more I always say it or name it, non-traditional groups of people which we haven't recruited so far, and therefore it's a better potential or an extended potential in the market. Secondly, what we've seen that diversity plays also a role for the attractiveness of an employer. And candidates, and that's really changing, candidates are asking for, are you really committed to diversity? I've read that somewhere on your webpage, but is it really true? And that is something which is really changing. Therefore, and also surveys told us that it's an attractiveness factor. And therefore, we better make sure that we do that in a correct way.
Yes, I think people are getting more and more conscious and making their choices based on a set of principles, especially the new generation, and that's Absolutely. Good news.
That is good news, yeah.
Yeah. I understand that you have also an objective of 30% women in leadership by 2024. Yeah. How do you actually plan to achieve this?
That's a good question. Yeah, we have, and that's a commitment, first of all, from the managing board, 30% women in leadership as one dimension of our diversity strategy. And that is kind of challenging. And by the way, we really moved the needle, and now we're at 26%. So 4% more to go by 2024, so that's still challenging, but it gives us really the exposure that we can tap into a new talent pool. How can we achieve that? Frankly, with a clear strategy and clear measures. So first of all, the commitment from the managing board, sure, but then really concrete measures. And we have 4 pillars of measures. And that is, first of all, marketing, how to position yourself as an attractive employer for female applicants. Secondly, it's the recruiting piece. So really kind of check how to address women, how to hire, how to source women. And the third pillar is numbers. Data. Yes, I'm an HR person, but I'm talking about data, and really kind of have data along the overall recruiting process. Therefore, I can find out how many people I get as an applicant and how many people I lose along the process, and then we can talk with the business better. And the last pillar is the mindset, and that is something I can be a role model as HR, but Frankly, it's the HR manager, or not the hiring manager, who has to change, who is kind of the mindset, you know, that we really want to hire more women, even if it's technical. And that's for the women piece, but that's also for all the other diversity dimensions for disabled people and so on.
Yep. Thank you very much, Kerstin. We typically view the Nordic countries as diversity pioneers globally. I think most of you will agree with me. But they still face diversity challenges. What are the main challenges in your case, Maria, and how do you intend to overcome this?
I would say that when it comes to female inclusion, we have come very far in Sweden and also at MTRX. I am part of the management team at MTRX, and we are at 50-50. And that's also a goal of the entire MTR corporation in Sweden as well. So it's one of the key KPIs that we are actually following month by month, and it's something that we are reporting month to month as well. And also at MTRX, we have a quite large share also when it comes to drivers that are female. So I think we have come quite far when it comes to gender equality. But however, I think we have the issues when it comes to the other diversity areas. That's where we need to put more focus, I would say. When it comes to the MTR Corporation in Sweden, then it's a completely different story. They are working very intently with this issue and have been doing that for quite some years. Then they are one of the biggest employers in Stockholm, and they are involving parts of the Stockholm community where you have a large share of foreign-born people, and they have work fairs, and they are actively trying to recruit people and are quite successful. So when you are for example, in the Stockholm subway, you see a very diverse staff.
And Maria, what about the new generation? About the highly educated, digitally native, much more conscious, as Kerstin mentioned earlier. How can actually the public transport sector attract these people?
Yeah, that's one of the key challenges that I face. I'm not a HR person. I am a chief commercial officer. But of course, brand is really an important part of this. And brand is something that I work with on a day-to-day basis. And of course, one of our key challenges as being a small, innovative challenger in the Swedish market, it's our key issue is really awareness, to get enough people to know that we actually exist. So we are on the map of potential employers. So that is one of the key challenges, to really reach out there. So that's something that we are working on day by day.
So there is a lot of untapped potential also when it comes to the new generation. I would like to get to Daisy. Is diversity and inclusion actually only about doing good or about doing well as a business?
I think it's a mix of both. You'd like to hope that a business would engage with diversity and inclusion processes because it's simply the right thing to do, but we all live in the real world. It doesn't always happen that way. So it is also good to note that diversity and inclusion leads to direct financial benefits for organizations as well. So from Harvard Business Review, organizations with above average diversity in their employee base experience around an average of 19% higher revenue year on year. So there is a huge financial incentive for innovation, for bringing in diversity and innovation as well. And innovation is really the space I focus on. So thinking about the whole transport web too, not just the operators and the providers and at a government level, but also the hundreds and thousands of millions of people on this board today who have sponsored this event, who are providing the technology and providing the innovations for the future. Are they also diverse? Are they talking to customers? So are we really kind of rooting this in at every different stage? And yeah, you can make money off that as well. It's a financial incentive as much as a moral incentive.
And putting aside the financial incentive, does actually diversity and inclusion result also into innovation? I know that you are working a lot in the area of innovation, so have you, from your experience, actually seen that it does result into innovation when you have a diverse and inclusive workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got a wider range of people working on something with a wider range of lived experiences and a really diverse range of backgrounds, then the innovation potential is exponentially increased. And suddenly you find that you bring in different perspectives and you can experience new things, and you can bring that to the passengers as well. So rather than just seeing things from one potentially very narrow perspective, you can expand this out and think about, well, what do other passengers need and different types of people need? So you're increasing your potential for innovation there as well. And then also thinking about making sure that that's represented through your entire business. So you don't just have diversity at the kind of lower level or entry level of your business. You need to make sure that that's something that you're rooting through the entire organization. So again, when you've got a higher representation of women at C-suite and senior level, again, you're experiencing 34% more innovation and more innovation revenue directly because of that. So lots of opportunity.
I think that's also good news, how many opportunities there are in that area. Caroline, until relatively recently, disability was really overlooked as part of the inclusion and diversity agenda. What has actually changed?
Good question. I think there's a lot of stigma around the subject. I think in past years it's really been looked at as a medical issue. Perhaps something for occupational health to worry about rather than a sort of diversity inclusion issue. And I think that we're learning that it's far more than a medical issue, of course, understanding that there's a medical side to this, but actually it's about how we have been excluding people, making assumptions about what they can and can't do. For example, the rail industry very focused on safety critical activities and thinking about how that impacts on roles. I think there's been a real fear in employing disabled people. So it's kind of like moving away from the part of assuming that because you have some kind of impairment or condition that you could never work in rail. I have cystic fibrosis, so I'm disabled myself. And I think lots of disabled people go on a journey. Most disabled people will develop a condition as they age, rather than like myself, who's born with a condition. And you might not be confident straight away to share that with an employer if you're already working for somebody. Or you might really worry about how sharing that will mean that you might not get an interview and sort of the views that society has on this. So I think it's great to know that we're actually moving away from it, just treating it as a medical issue, but actually seeing the fantastic value that disabled people bring in organisations, the impact on the end customer experience, because you already understand your customers by employing, representative of society. And in the UK, 1 in 6 people of working age are disabled, so it's a significant number of people. And in the organisations that we have already, you will have people who would meet that definition of disability, but perhaps just don't talk about it. So I think it's great to see this moving away from that and actually being far more open. I started my career not wanting to tell anybody I had cystic fibrosis because I was really worried about it, because my parents had said it was something to be concerned about. And I'm now 360 degrees, completely different from that now, open about it, want to talk about it, because I know that there are lots of people in our industries that will really benefit from us becoming much more open about this just being an everyday normal subject to talk about.
And of course, we have certainly different visible and non-visible disabilities, and how and actually why should companies embed those visible and not visible disabilities as part of their diversity and inclusion strategy? What is your take on that?
I mean, I think it's very traditional to think of disabled people in one way and then sort of visualise or imagine disabled people being a certain way, thinking maybe just about wheelchair users and having a stereotypical view of what it means. But of course, disability is much broader than that. When you think about neurodiversity, for example, 1 in 7 people in the UK are neurodiverse. And actually, I think it's quite possible actually in the rail industry itself that it'll be a higher figure than that, and that there is real skills that neurodiverse people and disabled people will bring with that. Diversity of thought, the fact that you can identify issues because you know how you would use or interact with something. So I think there's the benefit of tapping into that pool of people, but there's also the fact that you would, if you do it right, retain and progress the people that are already working for you rather than having a higher staff turnover.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Michelle, how will we deal with the loss of knowledge as more experienced workers retire? This is something that we see also in the Netherlands, but also in other countries.
Yeah, it's a big topic in the UK, with nearly a third of the UK rail workforce being aged 50 or over. So potentially in the next 5, 10, 15 years, losing that many people from the workforce means that there could be that loss of knowledge. Some of that might be circumnavigated by the introduction of new technologies, so older workings are phased out, so there's that sort of natural progression of people moving on. So for example, TfL with the Bakerloo line have got a certain number of trains that will be going out of service in due course, and they expect the people, the engineers, the drivers, etc., that have been working on that line with those trains for that period of time will probably retire when those trains go out of service, rather than retrain to learn new technology and the new skills. But I think whilst it's a worry that we might lose that knowledge, it's also an opportunity to encourage those older workers to share their knowledge. Apprenticeship schemes in the UK are popular, but not as popular and as well used as they could be. And that's a great vehicle for passing on that knowledge, passing on the skills to the future generations that are coming through. But I think as long as we keep the focus on skills, we will make sure that there is a place for the older workers in the workforce, so they feel empowered and they feel that they want to stay and continue to contribute rather than retire and take all of that knowledge with them. But I think we have to create a situation where they feel safe to share, so that knowledge can be transferred in a structured way.
Yeah, very, very important that indeed they feel, let's say, in a safe space. At the Academy, you are working a lot also when it comes to forecasting the future skills, demand and supply. How is actually forecasting key in advancing the agenda on diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a lot of work around forecasting what the future of the rail network will look like, so both infrastructure and the operating rolling stock, so looking at what that end state might be in 5, 10, 15, even 20 or 30 years. What types of skills will we need in the sector to operate those trains, to maintain the network, to keep things moving, making sure passengers are at the centre of that journey, requires different sets of skills. And I think as long as the focus remains on the skills that you need for that job to be done most effectively, diversity and openness will naturally evolve within the sector. We're doing quite a lot of work at the moment, and we've done some work with East West Rail about increasing the social value of jobs in the sector, so trying to open the labour market to more disadvantaged people, so people that wouldn't necessarily think of a career in rail, and trying to remove the stigma that exists that it's not an attractive industry. So people have this perception of the type of roles that exist, but actually we need to challenge that and say there are so many other things you can do, particularly as one of our previous speakers was talking about navigating way around the rail station. We've got lots of young people with IT skills that can create a digital twin version of the railway station, or create a different manner that encourages people to be able to access in different ways. So if we keep skills at the forefront of everything we do, recruitment, the processes, the planning, then we will naturally encourage that diversity, as long as we are going out to different pools of the labour market.
Thank you very much, Michelle. We are talking a lot about diversity, and that is certainly important, but our panel is also about inclusion. I would like to raise this as an open question, and if one of you would like to react, please take the floor. Why is inclusion different than diversity? I think not everyone in this room is aware, so that's important to highlight. Daisy, would you like?
Let Daisy go first.
Yeah.
We're both jumping on each other there to try and desperately answer this question. So I think the difference is, I think one of the best ways I've ever heard it described is diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. And I really like that explanation. It is just about being...
I like that too.
Yeah, it's a really nice way to put it. It's just about actually being part of the organisation, being part of the processes that are happening and being given the opportunity to be part of the kind of life of a culture, of an organisation's culture. And I think a really good example of that is actually in looking again at your structure. So if you've got a very different type of person at the base of your structure and very maybe more traditional base at the top, then you know that you've got diversity maybe. You could have a very high level of diversity, but are you being inclusive? Are people able to actually achieve in your organisation? So one of the things in 2017 in the UK, we did the first Whitehall, so government level gender pay gap assessment. And the worst department, nobody will be shocked, was Department for Transport. We had the worst gender pay gap, so it was 17%. There was a 17% difference in pay between men and women in the department. And when I spoke to a colleague about this, his response was, well, all the women are in the admin roles and all the men are in management roles, so that's their problem. As if women just didn't want to be a manager. It was just such a bizarre response. They just didn't want to be in those positions. And to be fair to the Department for Transport, in 2021, they reduced their gap to something like 8%, so a really significant difference in less than 4 years. But it is about that whole structural level of inclusion and making sure you can actually achieve at those different levels.
No, I think that's a very good explanation, so I will leave that to it. I see that we have 4 more minutes, so I would like to open the floor for the audience to raise questions to our panelists. Who would like to take this opportunity? I cannot see you all very clearly, so I would like Erin to help me. Is there anyone with a burning question for our panelists? I know that you are overwhelmed with information, but I see that there is a gentleman on the other side. Yeah, thank you.
At a United States pharma company. I won't name the company. The question I have for the panel is, how big are your DEI programs at your respective companies and the planned evolution in it? And I assume that they would fall under human resources or people management.
Should I take that? Okay. So first of all, what I already mentioned, D&I is really, it sits in the corporate strategy, first of all. It's a clear commitment, managing board, and it sits there. It's not an HR strategy topic. No, it's a business topic. And then we have a corporate D&I department. It sits with HR, but the philosophy behind is that it's not only a task of HR. Actually, diversity should live with all of us, and we should live it, and we should embrace it. The hiring managers, the employees, the managers. So that's, as HR, we could be the enabler, we could be pioneers, we could be good role models, but at the very end of the day, it's a subject which belongs to all of us, and in each and every leadership course and leadership life, and that's how we live it. So therefore, 330,000, hopefully, people representing diversity.
I think that's a very important message, and it could be one of our conclusions as a panel. Inclusion and diversity, it's not just an HR topic. It's about business and doing business. Is there any other question from the audience? Then I would like to raise the question about the opportunities and the challenges ahead. If you would like to conclude this panel with 1, 2 opportunities or challenges that you see as main priorities for the coming time, which ones would they be? Kerstin, you can start, and then we can have a round.
Diversity is a great opportunity, but please make something now and with concrete measures.
Yeah, I think diversity is talked a lot about in the UK with about bringing your whole self to work. So as organisations, we need to make sure that we can allow people to feel that they are able to bring their whole selves to work, and then we'll get the best out of them and those skills will flourish.
As a then representative of the business on this panel, I would say, I mean, for me, it's when I'm in a recruitment process, making sure that the persons that we're bringing into the team add something new to the team, so we don't just replicate and do the same thing. So that's one of the key focuses and key opportunities, I would say.
I'm going to be a bit strange here and say that I think the biggest challenge for us is that the rail industry has really got some great resources on this, and we've got quite good traction on some subjects, but there seems to be a little bit of a change where there's slightly more cynicism about it as a topic, and we hear the word woke coming in quite a lot. And I don't want that to stop us from doing the important work around diversity and inclusion. And that's my biggest worry. So I think that's going to be the challenge in the years ahead, is how we balance that fine line between appearing to be a subject that might be triggering for some people, but to really see the value in the business benefits that it brings.
I think I would say really think about the impact that COVID has had specifically as well on our workforces. So we know that COVID has massively disproportionately affected women and people from a really wide range of backgrounds and communities, but tends to be more disadvantaged backgrounds who have been forced out of work. So going forward and away from COVID, hopefully, thinking about how we can actually start to correct some of that and bring people back and start to correct the balance.
I think I would like to close this panel looking also at the time. We did our best to address this very important topic in half an hour, and I hope you will leave the first day of the World Passenger Festival with some important takeaways on how you can actually include diversity and inclusion in your own strategy and bring it on the agenda in your own organizations and companies. So please join me in a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much.